The beneficent effect of occult science is that it not only satisfies thirst for knowledge, but gives strength and stability to life. The source whence the occult scientist draws his power for work and his confidence in life is inexhaustible. Anyone who has once had recourse to that fount will always, on revisiting it, go forth with renewed vigor. There are people who will not hear anything about occult science because they think they discern something unhealthy in what has just been said. These people are quite right as regards the surface and outer aspect of life. They do not desire that to be stunted, which life, in its so-called reality, offers. They see weakness in man's turning away from reality and seeking his welfare in an unseen world, which to them is synonymous with what is chimerical and visionary. If, as occult scientists, we do not desire to fall into morbid dreaming and weakness, we must admit that such objections are partially justified, for they are founded upon sound judgment, which leads to a half-truth instead of a whole truth, merely because it does not penetrate to the roots of things, but remains on the surface. If occult science were calculated to weaken life and estrange man from true reality, such objections would certainly be strong enough to cut the ground from under the feet of those who follow the spiritual line of life. But even in regard to such opinions as these, occult science would not be taking the right course in defending itself in the ordinary sense of the word. Even in this case, it can only speak by means of what it gives to those who really penetrate into its meaning. That is, by the real force and vitality which it bestows. It does not weaken life, but strengthens it, because it equips man not only with the forces of the manifest world, but with those of the invisible world, of which the manifest is the effect. Thus, it does not imply an impoverishment, but an enrichment of life. The true occult scientist does not stand aloof from the world, but is a lover of reality, because he does not desire to enjoy the unseen in a remote dream world, but finds his happiness in bringing to the world ever fresh supplies of force from the invisible sources from whence this very world is derived, and from which it must be continually fructified.
Some people find many obstacles when they enter upon the path of occult science. One of these is expressed in the fact that a person attempting to take the first steps is sometimes discouraged because at the outset he is introduced to the details of the supersensible world, in order that he may, with entire patience and devotion, become acquainted with them. A series of communications is made to him concerning the invisible nature of man, about certain definite occurrences in the kingdom of which death opens the portals, and regarding the evolutions of man, the earth, and the entire solar system. What he expected was to enter the supersensible world easily, at a bound. Now he is heard to say, "Everything which I am told to study is food for my mind, but leaves my soul cold. I am seeking the deepening of my soul life. I want to find myself within. I am seeking something that will lift my soul into the sphere of the divine, leading it to its true home. I do not want information about the human being and world processes." People who talk in this way have no idea that by such feelings they are barring the door to what they are really seeking. For it is just when, and only when, with a free and open mind, in self-surrender and patience, they assimilate what they call merely food for the intellect, that they will find that for which their souls are athirst. That road leads the soul to union with the divine, which brings to the soul knowledge of the works of the divine. The uplifting of the heart is the result of learning to know about the creations of the spirit. On this account, occult science must begin by imparting the information which throws light on the realms of the spiritual world. So too, in this book, we shall begin with what can be unveiled concerning unseen worlds through the methods of occult research. That which is mortal in man, and that which is immortal, will be described in their connection with the world, of which he is a member. Then will follow a description of the methods by which man is able to develop those powers of cognition latent within him, which will lead him into that world. As much will be said about the methods as is at present possible in a work of this kind. It seems natural to think that these methods should be dealt with first, for it seems as though the main point would be to acquaint man with what may bring him, by means of his own powers, to the desired view of the higher world. Many may say, "Of what use is it for me that others tell me what they know about higher worlds? I wish to see them for myself." The fact of the matter is that for really fruitful experience of the mysteries of the unseen world, previous knowledge of certain facts belonging to that world is absolutely necessary. Why this is so will be sufficiently brought out from what follows. It is a mistake to think that the truths of occult science, which are imparted by those qualified to communicate them, before mention is made of the means of penetrating into the spiritual world itself, can be understood and grasped only by means of the higher vision, which results from developing certain powers latent in man. This is not the case. For investigating and discovering the mysteries of a supersensible world, that higher sight is essential. No one is able to discover the facts of the unseen world without the clairvoyance, which is synonymous with that higher vision. When, however, the facts have been discovered and imparted, everyone who applies to them the full range of his ordinary intellect and unprejudiced powers of judgment will be able to understand them and to rise to a high degree of conviction concerning them. One who maintains that the mysteries are incomprehensible to him does not do so because he is not yet clairvoyant, but because he has not yet succeeded in bringing into activity those powers of cognition which may be possessed by everyone, even without clairvoyance. A new method of putting forward these matters consists in so describing them after they have been clairvoyantly investigated that they are quite accessible to the faculty of judgment. If only people do not shut themselves off by prejudice, there is no obstacle to arriving at a conviction even without higher vision. It is true that many will find that the new method of presentment as given in this book is far from corresponding to their customary ways of forming an opinion. But any objection due to this will soon disappear if one takes the trouble to follow out these customary methods to their final consequences.
When, by an extended application of ordinary thought, a certain number of the higher mysteries have been assimilated and found intelligible by anyone, then the right moment has come for the methods of occult research to be applied to his individual personality. These will give him access to the unseen world. Nor will any genuine scientist be able to find contradiction, in spirit and in truth, between his science, which is built upon the facts of the sense world, and the way in which occult science carries on its researches. The scientist uses certain instruments and methods. He constructs his instruments by working upon what nature gives him. Occult science also uses an instrument, but in this case, the instrument is man himself, and that instrument too must first be prepared for that higher research. The faculties and powers given to man by nature at the outset, without his cooperation, must be transformed into higher ones. In this way, man is able to make himself into an instrument for the investigation of the unseen world. Chapter 2. The nature of man. With the consideration of man in the light of occult science, what this signifies in general immediately becomes evident. It rests upon the recognition of something hidden behind that which is revealed to the outer senses and to the intellect acquired through perception. These senses and this intellect can apprehend only a part of all that which occult science unveils as the total human entity, and this part is the physical body. In order to throw light upon its conception of this physical body, occult science at first directs attention to a phenomenon which confronts all observers of life like a great riddle, the phenomenon of death, and in connection with it, points to so-called inanimate nature, the mineral kingdom. We are thus referred to facts, which it devolves on occult science to explain, and to which an important part of this work must be devoted. But to begin with, only a few points will be touched upon, by way of orientation. Within manifested nature, the physical body, according to occult science, is that part of man which is of the same nature as the mineral kingdom. It lays strong emphasis upon the fact that in this principle of the human being, which it looks upon as the physical body, and which death reduces to a corpse, the same materials and forces are at work as in the mineral realm. But no less emphasis is laid upon the fact that at death, disintegration of the physical body sets in. Occult science therefore says, it is true that the same materials and forces are at work in the physical body as in the mineral, but during life, their activity is placed at the disposal of something higher. They are left to themselves only when death occurs. Then they act, as they must in conformity with their own nature, as decomposers of the physical body. Thus, a sharp distinction must be drawn between the manifested and the hidden elements in man. For during life, that which is hidden from view has to wage perpetual war on the materials and forces of the mineral world. This indicates the point at which occult science steps in. It has to characterize that which wages the war alluded to as a principle which is hidden from sense observation. Clairvoyant sight alone can reveal its workings. How man arrives at awareness of this hidden element as plainly as his ordinary eyes see the phenomena of sense will be described in a later part of this book.
Results of clairvoyant observation will be given now for the reason already pointed out in the preceding pages. That is, that communications about the way in which the higher sight is obtained can only be of value to the student when he has first become acquainted in the form of a narrative with the results of clairvoyant research. For in this sphere, it is quite possible to understand things which one is not yet able to observe. Indeed, the right path to higher vision starts with understanding. Now, although the hidden something, which wages war on the disintegration of the physical body, can be observed only by the higher sight, it is plainly visible in its effects to the human faculty of judgment, which is limited to the manifested world. And these effects are expressed in the form or shape in which mineral materials and forces are combined during life. When death has intervened, the form disappears little by little, and the physical body becomes part of the rest of the mineral world. But the clairvoyant is able to observe this hidden something as an independent member of the human organism, which during life prevents the physical materials and forces from taking their natural course, which would lead to the dissolution of the physical body. This independent principle is called the etheric or vital body. If misunderstandings are not to arise at the outset, two things must be borne in mind in connection with this account of a second principle of human nature. The word etheric is used here in a different sense from that of modern physics, which designates as ether the medium by which light is transmitted. In occult science, the use of the word is limited to the sense given above. It denotes that which is accessible to higher sight and can be known to physical observation only by its effects, that is, by its power of giving a definite form or shape to the mineral materials and forces present in the physical body. Again, the use of the word body must not be misunderstood. It is necessary to use the words of everyday language in describing things on a higher plane of existence, and these terms, when applied to sense observation, express only what is physical. The etheric body has, of course, nothing of a bodily nature in the physical sense, however ethereal we might imagine such a body to be. As soon as the occultist mentions this etheric or vital body, he reaches the point at which he is bound to encounter the opposition of many contemporary opinions. The development of the human mind has been such that the mention of such a principle of human nature is necessarily looked upon as unscientific. The materialistic way of thinking has arrived at the conclusion that there is nothing to be seen in a living body but a combination of physical substances and forces, such as are also found in the so-called inanimate body of the mineral, the only difference being that they are more complicated in the living than in the lifeless body.
Yet, it is not very long since other views were held, even by official science. It is evident to anyone who studies the works of many earnest men of science, produced during the first half of the 19th century, that at that time, many a genuine investigator of nature was conscious of some factor acting within the living body, other than in the lifeless mineral. It was termed vital force. It is true this vital force is not represented as being what has been above characterized as the vital body, but underlying the conception was a dim idea of the existence of such a body. Vital force was generally regarded as something which, in a living body, was united with physical matter and forces in the same way that the force of a magnet unites itself with iron. Then came the time when vital force was banished from the domain of science. Mere physical and chemical causes were accounted all sufficient. At the present moment, however, there is a reaction in this respect in some scientific quarters. It is sometimes conceded that the hypothesis of something of the nature of vital force is not pure nonsense. Yet even the scientist who concedes this much is not willing to make common cause with the occultist with regard to the vital body. As a rule, it serves no useful purpose to enter upon a discussion of such views from the standpoint of occult science. It should be much more the concern of the occultist to recognize that the materialistic way of thinking is a necessary concomitant phenomenon of the great advance of natural science in our day. This advance is due to the vast improvements in the instruments used in sense observation, and it is in the very nature of man to bring some of his faculties to a certain degree of perfection at the expense of others. Exact sense observation, which has been evolved to such an important extent by natural science, was bound to leave in the background the cultivation of those human faculties which lead into the hidden worlds. But the time has come when this cultivation is once more necessary, and recognition of the invisible will not be won by combating opinions, which are the logical outcome of a denial of its existence, but rather by setting the invisible in the right light.
Then it will be recognized by those for whom the time has come. It was necessary to say this much in order that it may not be imagined that occult science is ignorant of the standpoint of natural science when mention is made of an etheric body, which in many circles must necessarily be considered as purely imaginary. Thus, the etheric body is the second principle of the human being. For the clairvoyant, it possesses a higher degree of reality than the physical body. A description of how it is seen by the clairvoyant can be given only in later parts of this book, when the sense in which such descriptions are to be taken will become manifest. For the present, it will be enough to say that the etheric body penetrates the physical body in all its parts, and is to be regarded as a kind of architect of the latter. All the physical organs are maintained in their form and shape by the currents and movements of the etheric body. The physical heart is based upon an etheric heart, the physical brain upon an etheric brain, and the physical body, with this difference that in the etheric body the parts flow into one another in active motion, whereas in the physical body they are separated from each other. Man has this etheric body in common with all plants, just as he has the physical body in common with minerals. Everything living has its etheric body. The study of occult science proceeds upwards from the etheric body to another principle of the human being. To aid in the formation of an idea of this principle, it draws attention to the phenomenon of sleep, just as in connection with the etheric body, attention was drawn to death. All human work, so far as the manifested world is concerned, is dependent upon activity during waking life. But that activity is possible only as long as man is able to recuperate his exhausted forces by sleep. Action and thought disappear, pain and pleasure fade away during sleep, and on reawakening, man's conscious powers ascend from the unconsciousness of sleep, as though from hidden mysterious sources of energy. It is the same consciousness which sinks down into dim depths on falling asleep, and ascends from them again on reawakening. That which awakens life again out of this state of unconsciousness is, according to occult science, the third principle of the human being. It is called the astral body.
Just as the physical body cannot keep its form by means of the mineral substances and forces it contains, but must, in order to be kept together, be interpenetrated by the etheric body, so is it impossible for the forces of the etheric body to illuminate themselves with the light of consciousness. An etheric body left to its own resources would be in a permanent state of sleep. An etheric body awake is illuminated by an astral body. This astral body seems to sense observation to disappear when man falls asleep. To clairvoyant observation, it is still present, with the difference that it appears separated from or drawn out of the etheric body. Sense observation has nothing to do with the astral body itself, but only with its effects in the manifested world, and these cease during sleep. In the same sense in which man possesses his physical body in common with plants, he resembles animals as regards his astral body. Plants are in a permanent state of sleep. One who does not judge accurately in these matters may easily make the mistake of attributing to plants the same kind of consciousness as that of animals and human beings in the waking state. But this assumption can only be due to an inaccurate conception of consciousness. In that case, it is said that if an external stimulus is applied to a plant, it responds by certain movements, as would an animal. The sensitiveness of some plants is spoken of, for example, of those which contract their leaves when certain external things act upon them. But the characteristic mark of consciousness is not that a being reacts in a certain way to an impression, but that it experiences something in its inner nature, which adds a new element to mere reaction. Otherwise, we should be able to speak of the consciousness of a piece of iron when it expands under the influence of heat. Consciousness is present only when, through the effect of heat, the being feels pain or pleasure inwardly.